What is up guys, Blue Spooky here with another 2-hour Megamix. If you guys are enjoying these daily uploads and these longer 2-hour videos, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you end up enjoying this one. If we could aim for 1,500 likes on these longer videos, that would be a good milestone to aim for. It all helps the channel to grow and the videos to do well, to ensure I can keep doing these for a long time to come. If you guys have any thoughts about the stories in this video, please be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below, as my favorite part about doing these is reading your guys' thoughts. Without further ado, I will let you enjoy the next 2 hours or so of true scary stories, and I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you again at the end of the video. I used to go on camping trips with my best friend Colin. From the time that we were just teenagers well into our late 20s, we both really enjoyed being out in nature and spent whatever little free time we had out in it. We never had a bad experience with it until the last time that we went camping together. In fact, because of what happened on that very trip, we never went camping together ever since. We had both taken a week off work. That technically added up to 9 days altogether, including the 2 weekends, of course. Neither of us were married and we didn't have any kids either, so we were able to spend as much time as we wanted to ourselves. We had a really good camping trip planned out as well. It was in a place that we had never gone to before, and that was the most exciting part of all. It was great to have new experiences in areas like that. This trip started out like any other really. We were having a nice time hiking out in the woods, sometimes doing a little fishing, and camping out at nighttime. Nothing unusual happened for the entire first half of the trip. It wasn't until we'd started heading back to our vehicle that something strange happened for the first time. When we were hiking or camping, Colin and I rarely ever went out of each other's sight, and we would never go out of earshot. We had been doing this for too long to make those sorts of mistakes concerning our safety. We had also never gotten lost before, taking maps of the areas when they were available, and marking our paths so we could be sure we were on the right way back. We were always very thoroughly prepared. I'm not really sure how this happened though. On the way back to our car, we somehow managed to get separated. I didn't really think too much of it at the beginning, as I didn't expect Colin to stray that far away from me. However, after he was gone for a bit more time than he usually would have been, I began to get a little bit concerned. I called out for him many times, wondering where he might have gotten off to. I expected a response back from him, but one didn't come. I called out over and over, hoping to hear any response, but I still didn't get anything back from him. I was sure I knew which direction he had gone off in, so I decided to go out that way myself and try and look for him. Colin was not the type of guy to fool around, so I knew he wasn't just playing a prank on me by not answering. Still though, I also hadn't thought he would have been able to get far enough away from me to not even be able to hear me. It was too early for me to assume something had happened to him though. The more I looked around without being able to find him, and the more I called for him without hearing any response, the more and more I got worried. There were some cliffs in the area, and it was possible he might have fallen down and hurt himself. If he was knocked out, it would be that much harder for me to find him. As time passed and I still hadn't found Colin yet, I began getting even more concerned. I didn't think I could continue moving back to the car until I'd found him, but I was searching quite a bit of area without stumbling across him, and I didn't really know what to do. As it began to get dark outside, I realized that I had to set up camp now. It would be much more difficult to find him in the dark. After setting up camp, I tried to look around for him for a little bit longer. However, looking around in the dark was way more fruitless than it had been in the light, so I gave up and went back to camp. As I was sitting by the campfire, wondering what the hell could have happened to my friend, I began to hear strange noises around the camp. Several times, I thought I heard footsteps circling the area. At first, I thought it may have been Colin, so I called out to him. No response once again. Since I knew it wasn't him now, it made me very nervous, thinking someone else may have been lurking around out here the entire time. After hearing the sounds for a little while, though, they suddenly vanished altogether. I went to sleep that night, very worried about my friend and a bit scared about what I'd heard earlier. I was finally able to get some sleep, and somehow slept through the entire night. The following day, I went out searching again. I didn't really care about getting back to the car a day or two late. I didn't want to go on and just leave him out there in the woods. I spent the entire day looking for him again. If something was wrong with him or he was injured, I assumed he couldn't have gotten very far away. Still, I was having no luck finding him at all. After not finding him at all the second day, I once again made camp that evening. Just like before, I heard sounds around the camp that night. It seemed like once again, someone was skulking about just outside of visual range. I really didn't know what to do. All I could think about was how to find some way to try and help me find Colin. I wasn't doing a good job of it on my own, and if too much time passed, he could die if he was injured. I didn't feel good about leaving without him, but it was the only choice I had. I was able to get out of the woods and get to the closest police station I could find. It was all a terrifying process, but one that really needed to be done. We started a bigger search, and Colin was found, barely alive. He had been attacked by something, but we never did find out what. When his life was saved, he had no memory of the attack itself, and has never recovered any memory of it over time. Sometime in that incredibly small period that I was out of earshot with my friend, he'd been attacked by something that we may never know what it is. I'm only fortunate the same didn't happen to me. If I also had been attacked, the two of us could have easily died out there in the mountains, with no one ever knowing. I grew up and have lived my entire life in an old European village. I don't feel comfortable mentioning exactly where it is, though, as obviously I still live there. This happened to me when I was a teenager, and it's scared me ever since then. There weren't really any places to work in the area I lived. It was mostly just old houses, spread out along the side of the road. There was a petrol station in the area, but it was a family-run operation, so when I was ready to get a job myself, I had no chance of getting one there. I had to end up getting a job that was a bit far away, in a different village. Most of the time, I would ride my bike there and home. The countryside was pretty vast, with moors stretching as far as the eye could see. My dad was a writer at the time, so he mostly worked from home. My mother, however, was a chef, and she spent a lot of time away from home in the city. We did have a second home in the city, and I would sometimes spend time there with her. However, I much preferred being in the village and spent most of my time there. This happened once when my parents were both off together in the city. My dad was going to be gone for a few weeks, and I had the house to myself in the meantime. Rather than spend much time at home, though, I actually piled on some more work hours. I had a job in that town working in a retail store. A lot of strange things happened that day. First, even though I was working the day shift that day, a coworker of mine didn't manage to make it in to work. Because of this, I was offered to work the closing shift as well, and since I didn't really have anything better to do, I accepted readily. I only occasionally worked the close, and it was always around 11 p.m. when the store closed. The second strange thing that happened was I noticed that my bike chain was broken. It wasn't fixable, and no stores were open for me to buy a new chain from. Plus, by the time we got out, my manager had already left, so I wasn't able to ask them for a ride home either. Although it was going to be a big pain in the butt, I had no choice but to simply walk home. I had ridden my bike many times along the road that led from the town to the small little village that my house was in. This was, however, the very first time I had ever walked it. I didn't know how long it would take me to do so. It was very dark out there on that road, unless there was a full moon out. On this night, it was only a half moon, so it wasn't really very bright at all. That didn't really bother me though, because I wasn't really afraid of the dark. I was around halfway home when I suddenly heard a car coming up from behind me. I turned around and saw a pair of headlights heading my way. I almost never saw anyone driving along that road at night. I was hoping the driver might offer me a ride the rest of the way home. When the driver got closer to me, they did pull over to the side. I kept walking for a bit, but the driver called me over to their driver's side door. I walked over there and said hello to the man that was driving. He asked me where I was going, and I let him know that it was just to the next village over. The road went through that way anyhow, so he asked me if I needed a ride. Originally, I was about to say yes. However, there was something off about this guy that made me take a pause. Something about him made me feel uneasy, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. The man was pleasant enough, I supposed, but just the combination of his look and the way he was acting struck me in a bit of a negative way. After thinking for a moment, I decided I'd rather just walk the rest of the way there. I made up a lie telling him I was actually out for the walk to get some exercise, but I appreciated the offer. For a few moments, the man kept asking if I was sure. He kept reiterating it was no problem for him to give me a ride. In fact, he was really pressing the issue even, made me more comfortable with my decision not to accept it. After making sure I was okay for the 5th time, the guy finally drove away. I made the rest of the way home after a really long walk. I was so exhausted by the time I got there that I immediately fell asleep and didn't even wake up until late the following day. Luckily, I did not have work that day, so I just stayed home and watched some TV and read a bit. That was when a news story caught my attention. Apparently, in the town I worked in, a hitchhiker had been attacked and badly injured. An eyewitness account had a description of both the car and the man I had encountered that night, driving away from the scene of the attack. Days later, the driver of that car was arrested, and his face was shown on the news. Clearly, the very same guy who'd offered me a ride that night. The whole thing sent a chill down my spine. It also made me think I was pretty fortunate to trust my instincts involving that guy. Even though we communicated for only a brief moment, I subconsciously gained enough information to know it was a bad idea to get involved with that man. I had this unexplainable experience once while out exploring in the woods. The thing is, the area that I was exploring in was an area I had been in many times before. Nothing like that had ever happened before then, and nothing like it has ever happened since then either. I really don't know to this day what to think about it exactly. My family owned a very large amount of rural property when I was growing up. We lived in a house smack dab in the middle of all that property. Most of it was just hills and trees, and nothing was ever done with the property. It did make for a wonderful area for me to hang out in while I was growing up, though. I like to explore as much as possible. I did this all year long, no matter what the weather was like. It was just nice to be out in nature. I was 13 years old when this story takes place. This was on a pretty lazy summer day. School had been out for quite a while. There was nothing on TV, really, and I couldn't find a good book that I wanted to read. I decided to go out and do some exploring. There was a creek that I really liked to go down to and occasionally hunt for salamanders. That seemed like the perfect thing to do on a day such as this. Right away, something felt different about this particular hike, though. I couldn't really tell what it was, but it almost felt like I was being watched. It was that strange, almost unexplainable feeling that sometimes one gets when they least expect it. There were tons of no trespassing signs around the fences that surrounded the area, and they were barbed wire fences as well. Plus, of all the houses in the area, there weren't any that had kids or anyone young enough that they would be out hiking on someone else's land. All the times that I'd gone out exploring, one of the reasons that I did was because I liked the solitude of it all. I went down to the creek and started my search for the salamanders, but I'd never once lost that strange feeling. I just couldn't get comfortable at all. A cracking sound caught my attention. I looked around, thinking I would see a squirrel or something like that. Instead, what I caught was a glimpse of something moving away behind a tree. I had only seen it for the briefest of moments, so I wasn't exactly sure what I had seen, but I thought it was a person. "Hello?" I called out to the figure. "Is someone over there?" I didn't get an answer, so I decided to slowly approach the area. I was a bit nervous, thinking I'd find someone there watching me, but as I peered around the other side of this tree, there was no one there. I thought that what I'd heard was probably a squirrel, and what I thought I'd seen must have been my imagination. Still, that ominous feeling didn't leave me, and what's worse is that for a while after, I kept hearing these strange noises as well. My stay at the creek wasn't turning out to be as fun as it normally was. From the feeling, the noises, and what I thought I saw, I was not able to enjoy myself at all. I heard another sound which caused me to snap up and look across the creek. Far on the other side of it, I once again saw a figure standing there. This time, though, it stayed there for more than just a short moment, before running away out of sight again. I was positive that time I had seen something. This time, however, I did not feel an urge to call out to them. I didn't feel good about this. This person on our property, why did they keep ducking out of sight? I could only surmise that it was because they were up to something no good. The uneasiness helped me decide it was time to go back home. I was nervous as I was walking back. I kept looking over my shoulder to see if this person was still following me. I didn't see anything back there each time that I looked, though. I was over halfway back to my house now, still glancing over my shoulder over and over. After one glance, I turned forward again and stopped right in my tracks. This time, the figure was right in front of me, blocking the path to my house. Also, this time, it didn't hide quickly. They kept in my line of sight for quite a while. Thus, I got my absolute best look at them. I don't know what to say, really. To that point, I knew it was a person that I was only occasionally seeing glimpses of. The reason I hadn't been able to make out any of their features beforehand, though, was that they didn't seem to have any at all. The person that was looking at me, standing right in front of me, was completely covered and had no defining characteristics at all. They were outlined completely in black, and I couldn't make out anything. Despite the fact that I was unable to see their eyes or face, I could still tell they were staring at me. This made me feel apprehensive. They were looking at me, and all I could do was stand there and wait to see what they would do. Finally, after what seemed like forever, they ducked behind a tree just like they had before. I was scared to walk further, but I needed to do so in order to get home. I slowly walked that way, waiting to see it again. I came upon the area with the tree, but upon glancing behind it while passing, I didn't see anything there either. It was so scary. After seeing them that last time, I rushed home as quickly as I could get there. I thought about it and eventually decided not to mention anything about it to my parents. They would likely think it was just my imagination. I really didn't want to have to deal with it, so I kept it to myself. I still think about it every now and then. I don't know who they were, but I never did catch another glimpse of them. There were plenty of times when I was growing up that my older brother would try to scare me. When I was really young, he was somewhat successful with it. But of course, when someone tries scaring you over and over again, you eventually get used to it, and then it doesn't scare you very much at all. As we all got older, things changed quite a bit. He wasn't getting the reactions from me that he previously had been, and so he wasn't scaring me as much. It was a good feeling, feeling that you've defeated your older brother whenever he was trying to torment you. I also soon began to forget that he was ever doing things like that to me. When he was 17, he stopped hanging out at home very often. We assumed he was just out with his friends all the time, but he had really grown distant from everyone else in the family. He would rarely show up for meals, and if he did, he would take his food and eat it away from everyone else. My parents really didn't give much thought to my brother's change in behavior. They insisted that all teenagers go through phases like that, so I took them at their word and assumed I didn't really have anything to worry about. I was home after school and I was the only one there one day. My parents both worked a lot of hours, so this was pretty common. My brother wasn't home either, so it was only me there. I was sat about trying to decide what I was going to have for dinner. I remember this day for many reasons, the first being that it was very windy outside. Because of that, I'd been hearing a lot of noises out there. The house was pretty old, so it was making a lot of creaking noises too. What bugged me the most, though, was how sometimes our screen door in the kitchen would unlatch itself on these windy days. When that happened, the wind would cause the door to bang open and bang closed, and unless you went and put the hook lock onto it, it would keep doing this. I went and made sure the screen door was secured after hearing it bang several times in the wind. Then I went and tried to finish making myself something to eat. Once I was done, I went into the living room and tried to watch some television while I had my meal. It wasn't long until I heard what sounded like the door coming loose again. Since I had used the hook lock, I wasn't sure what it could have been, but if the door got torn off its hinges, that would make things a lot worse. I got up and went back to the kitchen to see what was going on, annoyed and about to secure the door once more. However, the door wasn't open. My older brother was at the back door, and he was banging on the screen door for some reason. He was complaining about the door being locked and told me that I had to open it for him. I asked him why he didn't just come in through the front door like everyone did. The question seemed to make him very angry, however. He began pounding on the door harder and harder and telling me to open the damn thing already. I went over to open it, but the look on his face made me stop. I wasn't sure what it was, but there was something in his eyes I didn't recognize. I'm not sure how else to put it, but it didn't seem like I was looking at my brother. There was some vacant other person behind those eyes. My pause made my brother pound on the door even harder, and I could tell he was really getting pissed off. I thought he was trying to scare me, but I wasn't sure what to think about what was going on. He began pulling the screen out of the screen door in order to get to the lock. I couldn't imagine he would ever be stupid enough to deliberately destroy a part of the house. My parents would have killed him. He started yelling at me, threatening all sorts of things he was going to do to me once he got in. I was about to run off, but I didn't because a part of me still thought he was trying to scare me. When he made it through the door, though, he didn't stop at all. He went right over to the knife block. That was when I turned and ran. I went quickly up to my stairs and into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. Because it was an older house, we had some good, solid doors inside. There was no way my brother was going to be able to break through them on his own. He did attack the door and yell and scream at me for a while, though, demanding that I open it right now. After a while, he gave up, and everything went quiet. I didn't come out of my room until my parents got home. They found my brother sitting in the bathtub upstairs, shivering with the kitchen knife beside him. He claimed to not really know what was going on, and my parents were very confused. I relayed the whole story to them, and he seemed to sincerely have no memory of what happened. It seemed my brother had a psychotic breakdown or a fugue state or something like that. I believe the last one is what the doctor said. To this day, he denies that he ever faked what happened as a practical joke. He admitted to every joke beforehand, so I have no reason not to believe him. He'd really done a number on my door, so I have no idea what would have happened to me if I hadn't gotten to my room in time. My grandma's basement has always scared me. It was dark, damp, made entirely of stone, and had no light at all. Apparently, it was older than the very house that sat on top of it, though I didn't know exactly how old until I did some further research. To avoid getting ahead of myself, though, I'm going to start from the very beginning. My grandma suffered from the beginning stages of dementia around the time this story happened. She became paranoid, constantly worried that someone was watching her, and no one was ever allowed in the basement when we would visit. We figured it was just out of worry or one of her tics. But just in case the basement was unstable or something, no one ever did go in to find out. That is, until one day, when I was about 15 years old. I was going through my teenage rebellion phase, and was extremely cringy about it too. I'd stay up late just to sneak a sip of beer from my dad's case, and just generally and quietly ignore rules my parents had set. However, I hadn't gotten to the basement at my grandma's yet, for a couple of reasons. One was that I'd gotten too old to be left at her house to be babysat by her, and her health was getting worse anyway, and the other was just because I was kind of scared. Grandma's paranoia had been drilled into me since childhood, so even in my rebellious phase, thoughts of the old structure collapsing or something while I was down there haunted me. That same year, Grandma's situation changed. She fell in her driveway one winter morning, a fall that resulted in a broken hip and months of rehab. A concerned neighbor called the paramedics, and she refused to let them help her. That's the tame story, though. When I was older, my parents decided I should hear the full story, as the parents went down to stabilize her and check on her vitals. My sweet, concerned grandma changed into a completely different person. She swore, bit and scratched at anyone who tried to approach her, screaming that she would not leave her home under any circumstances. Everyone said that wasn't really her talking. The drastic change in behavior was the disease affecting her brain, but that didn't really make me feel any better. As terrible as that day was, it was a prelude to the day I finally went into the basement. At some point during her rehabilitation, Grandma was deemed unfit to live on her own and placed into a care facility. Since my dad was her only child, it fell to him to take care of her affairs. That included cleaning out, sprucing up, and selling the house. Grandma didn't have much to her name, and the house was in a nice part of town, so that was the easy part. The hard part came when we had to assess the basement. We didn't have enough money to hire a contractor, so my dad volunteered to look at the foundations himself. I could tell he was a bit hesitant to go down there. Grandma's paranoid ramblings were fresh in everyone's minds, so I said I'd go with him. My mom was on standby at the top of the stairs, just in case something happened. My dad handed me some tools and a flashlight and opened the basement door. The draft of stale air immediately hit me in the face. It smelled awful, like there was something moldy down there. I don't think I'll forget that smell for a long time. The stairs were wooden and had no railings and were quite damp. They were practically half rotted. They creaked loudly as we walked down them. No wonder Grandma never came down here. There were cobwebs everywhere. Gives me the creeps just remembering it. My dad shined his flashlight into the space at the bottom, and I could hear him take a deep breath. I couldn't see what he was looking at until I peered over his shoulder, and what we saw is something neither of us are likely to ever forget. Packed wall to wall in that small space were tables filled with antique jars, and they weren't empty either. Preserved specimens glinted back at us, covered in layers of dust. There were eyes, organs, small reptiles, bugs, even an ancient human skull missing its teeth. I wanted to get out of there, but I also couldn't look away. Did Grandma know about this? Is that why she never allowed anyone down there? What effect did this forgotten piece of history have on her mental state? I wondered if she might have seen the eyes in the jars and convinced herself they were watching her. We went about testing the ceiling while trying to avoid this discovery as much as possible, then went back upstairs. My parents stayed quiet for a long time. Eventually, they told me to go to the other room while they figured out what to do about it. They decided to contact someone from the next town over. They determined that the human body parts were probably from an old home practice of some sort, not a gruesome murder or something. As an adult, I can appreciate that historical side of things, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, I feel bad for what my grandma went through near the end of her life. I imagine those things in the basement didn't help her get any better when she was suffering from her delusions. I hope that when I buy my next house, they disclose everything that's inside beforehand. I worked at Papa John's for a couple of years at the end of high school and beginning of college. I delivered pizzas and sometimes helped with cleaning and stuff because I worked nights. This was my normal 4 to 11 shift on a slow weekday. By 10, we weren't really getting any further orders, so we'd start cleaning up and preparing for closing, so we could leave right as 11 o'clock hit. At 10:45 this day, though, the phone started ringing. I let my manager pick it up, and from hearing what he was saying, I knew someone must be placing an order. Despite my shift ending in 15 minutes, I still had to deliver the order. I was visibly annoyed. I waited for the pizza to be ready, and then left just before 11 o'clock. The address wasn't too far away, I think just under 10 minutes or so. When I got there, though, I was a little bit confused. There was a long driveway going into the trees, but I couldn't see any houses or lights at the end at all. I looked back at the map zooming in, and saw that there was a house. It was just really, really far down. I turned onto this driveway and put on my brights. After the first part that connected to the main road, it soon became a gravel path. It was honestly quite hard to follow because it was thin and the trees were really close to the sides. Eventually, it opened up a bit, and across a small field was an old wooden house. It was too big to be a cabin, but it was definitely giving off that middle-of-the-woods cabin type feeling. There wasn't exactly a clear place to park, so I just stopped in the gravel and got out. A few of the outdoor lights were on, but they were not bright at all. Most of the woods surrounding the area were pitch black. I started walking up to the door, hoping to get this done quickly. Something was starting to make me feel off about this place. I got up to the porch, but just before I knocked on the door, I heard something from behind me. It was leaves crunching in the woods, near the gravel driveway I'd just come from. I looked out there for a moment, but it was too dark to see anything. I turned back and knocked on the door. While I waited, I looked back at my car, wishing I'd left the keys inside so the headlights would stay on. Even from the porch, it was hard to see anything more than a small glare coming from the plastic reflectors. The rest of the car was not even visible, falling past the dim light coming from the house. I heard footsteps inside, and the door opened. It was an old man with short black hair and glazed-over eyes. "I have a Papa John's pizza order for you," I said, holding out the box. There was a slight pause before the man slowly reached out and took it, looking me in the eyes the whole time. He set it down on a table next to him and got his wallet out slowly, counting through some cash. I heard it again, leaves crunching behind me. I looked over my shoulder toward my car, where I'd heard it coming from. Just when I thought I might have seen something, the man suddenly grabbed my shoulder and said, "Here, for you." He held out some cash. I took it and quickly looked back at my car, but didn't see anything. A few seconds later, I was shaken by the man slamming the door behind me. Before leaving the porch, I got my phone out and turned the flashlight on. I then hurried back to my car, shining the light in all directions. I didn't really see anything. I got in and made a small U-turn, then drove out of there. My unsettling feeling stayed with me the whole drive back though, and after clocking out, I did a quick walk around my car. For the most part, everything looked okay, but once I got a closer look, I noticed some scratches near the passenger door handle that hadn't been there before. I couldn't verify anything though, and even if I could, I don't really think there's anything I could do. Someone was out there in those woods, trying to get into my car without me knowing. Maybe it was all a setup from the start. I really can't say for sure. If they had gotten in though, there's a good chance they would have hidden the back seat and waited for me. Whatever would have happened after that is best left unknown. This happened to me when I was in 5th grade. I was a safety patrol. My job was to assist the 1st grade teacher in dismissing the kids for the day. After I was done, I would usually go to the other side of the school where there was a library. I would wait there with my brother for our parents to come pick us up. To better understand what happened that day, I have to explain the layout of getting to the library. From my school, I would come out of the side and walk over to a fence that separated the school from the library. There was a bush with a small space that I would usually use as a shortcut, as opposed to walking the length of the entire fence to get to the front entrance. When I was done helping the teacher, there was mostly nobody left in school. I was almost always the last one to leave, as I was the only safety patrol who didn't get picked up directly. As I approached the aforementioned shortcut on this day, I heard a movement from somewhere nearby. Soon, a figure emerged out of nowhere. It was a tall, skinny man, staring at me with a completely crazed look in his eyes. The man appeared severely disheveled, as if he had just jumped out of taking a nap in a dumpster. I was a bit freaked out, because the man really had appeared out of nowhere. I started moving faster, and then I heard running footsteps charging right toward me. Without looking, I began running. I made it to the bush where the shortcut was, and forced my way through. I got a few scratches in the process, but I continued running. I finally looked behind me to see what was going on, and saw the deranged man struggling as he made his way through the bushes. Since I was a lot smaller, it was a lot easier for me to get through. The man ended up getting stuck, and appeared to be out of breath. I used this opportunity to make my way into the library. As soon as I was inside, I hid behind my brother, who was sat down at a computer. He was too occupied to see that I was in a panic. The man soon appeared outside the front doors and made his way inside. He began searching the aisles of books, appearing to look for me. At that point, he turned and made direct eye contact with me. He quickly noticed my brother, who was still staring at the computer screen. The man saw there were also other people in the library as well. He flashed me an intensely hateful look, then left immediately. After he was gone, I told my brother what just happened, but he didn't believe a single word of it. He just went back to playing on the computer. In hindsight, I know I should have told someone besides my brother. Right when it happened, too. Maybe a library employee or the nearest adult. When my parents came to pick us up, I told them what happened. My parents were shocked, and immediately told the librarian. She picked up the phone and called the police. They arrived soon after and interviewed me. The next day, I had a meeting with the safety patrol group. They were all surprised because this school was considered one of the safest in the county. My mother was furious and told them that from that day forward, a teacher would have to supervise me when I walked over to the library. A couple of days later, I was called into the head office during the school day. Some detectives came in and showed me some surveillance footage from the library. They told me they were doing everything they could to find the man. An abductor on school grounds is something that law enforcement does not mess around with, especially when the word gets out and other parents hear about it. A couple of days later, I was in the library again, waiting for my parents to come pick up my brother and I. I was reading a magazine when I happened to look up and see that very same man. My blood just about ran cold. It was the same guy. I'll never forget his face for as long as I live. He looked normal this time, though, and had a young girl with him. She wasn't acting like she was afraid of him or anything, so I think she may have been his daughter. After the two of them left, I informed the librarian, who made a note of it. I haven't seen the man again since that day, and we haven't gotten any updates from the police. Whoever he was, he either had an evil twin who tried to grab kids, or lived a double life as a loving family man by day and a child abductor by the evening. This story happened in the fall of 2009 when I was in my senior year of high school. I grew up in a small suburb in Utah, and I played football for my entire life. As a senior, I was the captain of the team. Our stadium was near the center of town. When this all started, we were playing our second home game on a cloudy Saturday evening. I had scored both of our team's touchdowns up to that point, and we had kept the other team scoreless. Midway through the third quarter, one of the kids on the other team suddenly started throwing punches at me and cursing. I ignored it and tried to walk away, but the referee still kicked us both out of the game. That was much to the dismay of our head coach, who I'll call Coach Joe for this story. After I was ejected, Coach Joe reluctantly sent me back to the locker room. I started the long walk under the stands to the locker room, but when I got there, the door was wide open. This was quite unusual, as Coach Joe usually locked it when we went out on the field. I wasn't really too concerned about it, though. After about an hour, the rest of the team got back in. It had been a complete blowout. We won 27-6. We celebrated for a while, then everyone left except for me and two of the other captains, Marion and Mason. Coach Joe called me into his office to tell me he thought my ejection was a bad call. He was proud of me for walking away from the kid. After he finished, I asked him if he'd locked the door and explained to him that it had been open when I got back. He was confused as well. We both kind of blew it off. Fast forward to Wednesday. All week there had been an increased police presence. There were search helicopters everywhere 24/7 as well. Apparently, a young girl from the next town over from ours had gone missing Saturday night. I remember before practice that day we all noticed a putrid stench in the locker room. It was the same thing the day after as well. We'd all figured it was just our sweaty clothes making the smell. That was almost always the reason that locker rooms smell bad in general. After another game, Coach Joe told us to take home all of our stuff and wash it, and that he was having someone come to the stadium to fumigate the locker room, as he did once a month or so. We took everything home, but the smell was still there. When we went to practice the next morning, we were able to put up with it for a bit, but eventually it got to be too much. Every inch of the locker room smelled disgusting. It was so bad that 10 of my teammates had even gotten sick from it, along with 3 of the assistant coaches. This week, we had another home game. We were in what was usually our guest locker room, which smelled like perfume in comparison. Our opponents were behind the snack shack, and we ended up losing that game 17-3. Coach Joe told us we were off for the weekend, but he wanted me, Ryan, and Mason to help him find where this smell was coming from. We met him around 5 in the afternoon or so and started looking around. After about an hour, we still couldn't find the source of this putrid smell. There was nowhere left to look except for in the ceiling. We didn't think it could be coming from there, but Coach Joe had me check anyway, as a last-ditch effort. Mason grabbed the ladder from the team closet, and I climbed up and moved one of the tiles out of the way. I stuck my head in. After shining a flashlight around for a bit, I saw this small black bag within arm's reach. It was then that I remembered the whole thing about the missing girl, and how she'd gone missing the very same day that the locker room door had been left open. I was already starting to feel pretty sick. I was more nauseous than I thought was even possible. "What is it?" Coach Joe asked. I reached for the bag, and what I saw when I pulled it open will forever be imprinted in my memory. I saw the head of the missing girl. Her hair was mangled, her skin was black, and her eyes were sunken into her sockets. Ryan fainted, and Coach Joe threw up right in front of us. I dropped the bag and started running. Once we were able to collect ourselves, we called the police and an ambulance for Ryan, since he was still passed out. The police were able to confirm that the head did in fact belong to the missing girl. The rest of her body was never recovered. A couple of weeks later, they arrested a 28-year-old man that had confessed to killing her. He confessed to a few other things, too, that are just too evil for me to mention. I'll have to leave it up to your imagination. How he was able to sneak around so well while the game was going on is beyond me. I can't imagine the fear and pain that girl went through in the last few hours of his life. The crazy thing is, we were all joking about the possibility of there being a body hidden somewhere in the locker room, causing that horrible smell. Little did we know just how right we were. It's been years since then, and it's still hard for me to comprehend that there had been a human head decomposing above us in the locker room for nearly 2 weeks undiscovered. This story took place in the summer of 2017. My friend and I were young teenage girls at the time, and we didn't live in the best of areas. One night, we decided to go for a walk around the local pond, which wasn't far away from my house. It was pitch black out that night, although there was some sporadic lighting from the streetlights, which were all spaced pretty far apart, and there was still enough light to guide us to the pond, though. We left my house and began walking up the dark street. We stopped at one end of the pond and sat down on a bench. This bench just so happened to be right under the single light that overlooked the pond. Since the light was directly above us, anyone approaching would see us perfectly illuminated. Looking back, it probably wasn't a good idea to sit there at night. It practically made us into a pair of targets. We talked for a while, but after a few minutes I noticed some strange movement in the distance. I squinted my eyes and saw a group of silhouettes approaching us. Since I'm a paranoid person on a good day, I alerted my friend to the presence of what I assumed to be a group of people swiftly coming our way. We debated for a moment on what we should do. The first option was to keep sitting on the bench and assume they were harmless individuals who wouldn't do anything to us. The other option was to take no chances and make a run for it back to my house. Something about the way these figures were approaching seemed threatening to me. We quickly got back on our feet and started off with a speed walk. I looked back, and my worst fears were immediately confirmed. The group of figures was now sprinting right for us. That's when my fear truly kicked in. My friend and I began to run full speed. I kept looking back at the group as we ran, and noticed they were quickly gaining on us. I could not make out any of the features of the people due to the lack of lighting. We were just blindly running from several faceless figures, which only added to the terror. We eventually arrived at my house and hid in my front yard for a while since we were still being followed. I didn't want them to know where I lived. Eventually, we went inside, making sure to lock the doors behind us. When we were talking about it after the fact, she said that she'd never looked back like I did. We don't actually know if they attempted to follow us the whole way back. For all we know, it could have been a group of kids just playing a prank on us. But under the circumstances and with the area's reputation, we were just glad we didn't take any chances. This story is from the perspective of a woman. I've worked as the night shift telephone operator at a casino hotel for 14 years now. I'm used to dealing with drunks and perverts on a daily basis. I get a lot of especially unwanted attention because of my voice. I've been serenaded and even proposed to. I'm usually able to just shrug it off, but on the night in question, I received a phone call from someone who was truly an extremely deranged individual. It started off just like any other normal Saturday night. A drunken guest called from his hotel room. "Hey, can I get 2 sets of towels up here, please?" "My pleasure, sir. Is there anything else I can get for you?" Yeah, you." I sighed in annoyance. "I'll get those items up to you shortly, sir. Have a wonderful evening." I hung up thinking I'd heard the last from that guest, but I was wrong. About 15 later, he called back. "Hey, everything's here except for you." "I don't work in housekeeping, sir." "Damn, your voice though. I bet you're hot, aren't you? Why don't you come up and see me?" "Sir, I'm not allowed to leave my desk. Do you need anything else? Do you not understand what I'm telling you? I need you." I hung up on him again and continued to take calls. That night, I was the only operator on duty, which was usually the case. After a while, I had almost forgotten about that guy. That was until he called again about 30 minutes later. "Hey, I've got some champagne and cheesecake up here for you." "Not for me, sir. You enjoy it and have a good night." "Wait, don't hang up. You're the love of my life. I've never loved anyone but you." I was losing my patience with this drunken idiot. "Sir, I don't have time for this. Enjoy your cheesecake and have a nice night," I said firmly. I hung up. I knew I'd lost my temper, but I couldn't help it. This guy was really annoying me. A few minutes later, he called back. "If you won't come to me, I guess I'll have to come to you. I want you. I need you." "Sir, you need to stop calling me or I'm going to inform security. I'm trying to work here." I slammed down the phone again, slightly rattled. This had never happened to me on this level before. I was starting to get scared he would actually come down for me. He called back almost immediately. "What do I have to do to get you up here? You know that I know your boss. All I have to do is tell them I want you and you'll be mine. I practically own this fucking place." "One phone call and you're gonna be up here on your knees." I hung up the phone in disgust, then dialed security and explained to them what was going on. The security guys were mostly buddies of mine, so they said they would be up there to talk to him immediately and to let them know if he called back again. A short time later, he did. "They're trying to keep you from me, huh? They don't know how much I love you, how much I need you. I'm coming for you." I called security again. They told him if he called back one more time, they would have the sheriff's office come out. A short time later, I received another phone call from the lobby phone. At first, all I could hear was heavy breathing, and then a familiar voice came on. "I'll fucking find you. I need you. You belong to me." I hung up and called security, who immediately sent an officer to the lobby. They also said they were going to call the sheriff right away. Since I don't work the front desk, I was nowhere near the lobby. I was in a safe, undisclosed location where I didn't think he could really find me, but the caller's behavior still frightened me. My coworker then called me from the front desk. "Hey, there's this creepy guy up here asking about you. I didn't tell him anything, but do you need me to call security?" "Oh my god, are you kidding me? I've already called them. They should be on their way. Where is he now?" "He's standing right—" "Ah, shit, where'd he go?" My coworker told me to lock the office door. After that, I quickly contacted someone in surveillance. They said they were aware of the guy, and they were tracking him. He was pacing by the employee doors, looking for a way to get downstairs to where I was. Security caught up with him, and the sheriff pulled up as well. I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't realize until just then how bad I was shaking. This man was a lunatic, wandering the halls of the entire hotel searching for me. He didn't even know me. He had no idea what I looked like, and yet he was determined to find me. I was having a full-blown anxiety attack. I have no idea how much time passed before the head of security came into the office. The sound of the door opening made me jump. "Hey, it's all right. Just breathe. He's banned from here, and the sheriff deputies escorted him off the property. You should head home. You want me to call the manager for you?" "No, I'll be okay, thank you. I wasn't prepared for that level of craziness tonight." I was far from okay, but I knew there wasn't anyone to cover my shift, and I was no longer in danger. For the rest of that night, several of my buddies in security came by to check up on me. I don't know what exactly the man had said he was going to do to me to them, and I don't think I want to know, but I'll tell you this. I've never seen a group of big, tough guys look so worried and disturbed. I guess that's what happens when you come face to face with someone who's truly lost their mind. I was driving back from a friend's house who lived about an hour away from me. We'd lost track of time though, so I didn't leave until around 2 a.m. or so. I was really tired, and the drive was really boring most of the way home. It was a long straight road that didn't seem to have a single other car on it. For the first 20 minutes, it was just me, staring at the endless pavement up ahead and trying not to let my eyes close. All of a sudden, though, my eyes suddenly lit something up on the roadway. It was up ahead of me, and I couldn't tell what it was at first. As I got closer, though, I had to slow down and even eventually come to a stop. There was a semi-truck parked right in the middle of the road, blocking off both lanes. I sat there for a few moments, having no clue what exactly I was looking at. At this point on the road, we were at least 30 minutes from town, and there was nothing out here at all. The only reason anyone would stop out here was if there had been an emergency. I looked to the right side of the truck. There might have been just enough room for me to get around the trailer, but there was a steep hill on the shoulder, and that would be really risky to drive on the edge of. The other side of the truck had trees too close together for me to drive between. After being there for a whole minute, I figured this had to be some sort of emergency. My best and maybe only option was to check up on them and see what was going on. I got out of my car and began walking up to the front of the trailer. I remember how quiet it was. It was like the night was still and completely empty. I got up to the front and realized the light was on in the driver's cabin. I went up to the door and lightly knocked on it, then called out asking if they were okay. The window was way too high up to see through, so I couldn't really see anything from the ground. After a few seconds, there was still no response. I called out again, but there wasn't any sound of movement even. Inside my gut, it was telling me that something was seriously off about all of this. I looked down the road ahead, then back at the road I'd come from, seeing nothing but fog in the distance. That only reminded me how far I was away from anyone else. I grabbed the side of the door and lifted myself up onto the steps, then looked inside the window. There were things scattered everywhere, almost looking like they'd crashed or something. The whole cabin was a total mess, but nobody appeared to be inside. I noticed the door on the other side was wide open. I stepped back onto the road and began walking around the truck to investigate the open door. I was stopped in my tracks when I saw a man in the forest walking up the side of the hill. He was tall with shoulder-length hair and had a very disheveled appearance. "Hey man, are you okay?" The man didn't look at me, but continued coming up from the forest and onto the road. In faint lighting coming from my headlights, I saw dark red stains all over his clothes and his face. He was covered in dirt and grime as well. Thinking he was clearly not okay, I offered to help him, but he continued to not even acknowledge me. That was until I said I would call 911 for him. He immediately stopped walking and shot a look at me, holding eye contact for a few moments. "I'm fine," he said, in a deep and threatening tone. I stopped talking and watched him get into the truck. I then rushed back to my car. The truck just started driving away. I turned around and drove right back to my friend's house, where I called 911 and gave every detail I could remember. Unsurprisingly, the case never went further than that. What happened on that road is still a mystery, one that really terrifies me. The way that truck was stopped being sideways and with the cabin looking as chaotic as it did, I think someone or something must have forced them to stop. What happened afterwards is debatable, but I think the man I saw probably wasn't the original truck driver. I think we can all assume what likely happened in the forest below the road. I'm a local truck driver for a common grocery store in our city. This means I stay in the same 50-ish mile radius and drive between the warehouse and several stores every day to deliver pallets of groceries. I don't have to make any drives more than 2 hours long, so every night I get to go home at a fairly reasonable time and sleep in my own bed rather than at a truck stop like most cross-country or regional truckers. This day was pretty average, going between a few stores and delivering the pallets. I got to my last delivery location around 9 or so, and it took a half hour for them to empty the trailer. Then I was good to head back to the warehouse and turn in for the night. This was always the farthest drive though, being that the warehouse was on the very edge of the city, away from everything else. An hour into the drive, just about when I'd reached 15 minutes away, I pulled into a gas station to quickly fill up. I'd been riding on empty for a little bit too long now. I went to the diesel section and started the gas pump. While I leaned against the truck and waited, I saw a group standing outside of a parked pickup truck on the other side of the gas station. They were the only ones there, but they kept eyeing me, looking over at both me and my truck. It was a bit odd, but I thought they were waiting for me to leave, probably so they could do something stupid without any bystanders to watch them. Once my truck was full, I put the pump back and got in, driving out of the gas station. As I did, the group got into their own pickup and left as well, pulling up right behind me. Now, it was definitely more than just a little odd. I didn't know what exactly they were planning to do, but they weren't even trying to hide their nefarious intentions. Over the next mile, as we got further out toward the edge of the city, they kept swerving around behind me, going in and out of the lane. They were unable to keep a consistent speed. I got my phone from the mount and called the police to report this group for reckless and possibly drunk driving. Being in a huge semi myself, I didn't exactly feel unsafe. I was more worried for anyone else that may be on the road. After a couple more minutes though, they swerved into the lane next to me and sped up until they were right across from my window. I looked down at them and saw a few guys looking at me. They said something to the others. Then they sped up again and slammed on the brakes right in front of me. I had no choice other than to brake as well, stopping just before ramming into them. As soon as I did, all the doors swung open, and 4 of them came running to either side of my truck, trying to open the doors. I immediately went in reverse, trying to put some distance between us before I slammed back down into drive. My only choices were to take a chance at driving off-road, which might make my trailer topple over, or I could ram through their pickup. Obviously, I decided to go straight through their truck. All four of them ran off the road just before I hit it, and after 30 seconds, I was long gone. By the time I got to the warehouse, police had shown up to the scene, finding their pickup destroyed on the side of the road. All four of them were standing by it. As the officer put it, they were all very intoxicated and not willing to cooperate or explain what they were doing. Whatever it was they were doing, though, it was pretty scary having four drunk and aggressive guys trying to break into my cab. Although it all happened so fast and maybe doesn't seem that bad, I think if I hadn't acted so quickly, it could have easily escalated to something truly awful. There's no way of telling what might have happened, though. The year was 2015. I was around 14 or 15 back then, and was a freshman in high school. I was always a quiet kid. Everyone knew me as the one artsy girl who gave everyone the side eye. I didn't like anyone in my grade or my school for the most part. I usually had no friends and was always a loner. In 6th grade, though, a few years before 2015, I made a best friend named Ray. Ray and I were almost the same person, with just a few minor differences. We shared the same interests, did the same things, we even played the same kind of guitar, and we both hated everybody else. It was like we were long-lost sisters. We did a lot of things together, and I will admit that we did some weird stuff. As freshmen, we used to smoke and wander around the streets at night, which sparked the idea that we should sneak out into the forest behind the elementary school and smoke there. We lived in upstate New York, where small towns and gossipy people were the only things around, so smoking in the forest would be the safest spot. We didn't want our neighbors to find out and snitch on us. Fast forward to March. Ray and I had planned out what we were going to do. We decided to meet at a church that was 5 houses down from Ray's. At around midnight, I headed out. I packed a bag of cigarettes and a small lighter, as well as a few snacks. Sneaking out of the house would be a real challenge, since my sister would go ballistic if she found out I'd left. I managed to jump out of the second-floor window by landing on some small bushes below. I picked myself up and began to jog down the road to Ray's house. We didn't live too far away from each other. We went over to the church. There was a path behind the chapel that led up to a hill and towards the elementary school. As we walked, we were being obnoxiously loud, especially Ray. I assume she must have drunk something beforehand to make the night a little more fun for her. I was getting more nervous, though. I began to shush her, just in case anyone was around. Eventually, we ended up at the elementary school. We made our way past the playground and soon entered the dark forest beyond. The tall grass was covered in melting snow, which made the ground very damp and muddy. Our footsteps were loud, but we didn't care. Who else would be out in the woods at this hour? I forgot to mention that I'd also brought my ukulele with me. We found a spot by a large tree, and I began to play an old tune, while Ray danced around like an idiot, with a cigarette dangling from her mouth. We laughed for a while before we ended up talking about life and whatnot. It was around then that I realized it was pitch black, and I couldn't even see the moonlight. Hey, we've been out here for a while. Maybe we should start heading back now? It's got real dark all of a sudden, I said. Ray chuckled, saying I was trying to kill the mood. Regardless, though, I suddenly had the feeling we were not alone out here. I looked around as she continued rambling, and then I heard heavy breathing coming from somewhere close by. Thinking I was just being paranoid, I brushed it off and continued our conversation. Not even 2 minutes later, though, I heard actual footsteps behind us. I did not dismiss it this time. They were loud, heavy footsteps, crunching leaves beneath them as they got closer to us. I grabbed my belongings and tugged on Ray's arm, yanking her ass off the ground. I began screaming at her to run and pushed her ahead of me, ensuring she got a head start. She was not the fastest runner, and I didn't want her to get left behind. My heart was pounding so hard that I couldn't even hear her screaming. She quickly glanced behind her and suddenly screamed that someone was chasing us and about to grab me. I dashed in a different direction. The footsteps continued to pursue me, though. I ran as fast as I could, shouting at Ray to get back to the path that led out of the forest. Suddenly, the footsteps behind me stopped, and a loud and deranged bellow resonated through the trees, sending a chill down my spine. I quickened my pace and jumped over a small perimeter fence. I landed hard on the gravel on the other side, but I wasted no time getting back to my feet. I ran up the hill, where I saw Ray emerging from the forest. I reached my friend with tears in my eyes. Ray was terrified, covering her mouth with her hand and hyperventilating. "We need to get the fuck out of here," I told her. We took a different path back to my house. She was too scared to walk back home alone in the dark. The next morning, my sister asked me what she was doing there at our home and why there were dirty clothes scattered across the floor that smelled like cigarettes. We lied about the whole thing, but she knew that something was up. Thankfully, she never snitched on us. To this day, I have no idea who was out there in the woods with us that night, why they screamed like a deranged lunatic, or why they chased us. To any younger kids out there who feel like they need to sneak out at night, just don't do it. You don't want to end up telling a story like this, or never having the opportunity to tell one at all. So a little backstory. I grew up in a close-knit community, surrounded by houses and parks. As far as crime goes, very little ever occurred there. Things came full circle last year when I moved into a house in my old neighborhood. It was just off the main road that connected to a local mental hospital. There had always been an underlying concern from the residents about that place, but there had never been an incident where a patient escaped or anything. Over time, we just sort of got used to it. However, things changed over the years. It was no longer the quiet, peaceful place I remembered. The amount of noise and crime I witnessed after moving in was simply astonishing. My wife travels a lot for work, and when she does, I tend to sleep in my game room toward the back of the house. One night, I had this horrific nightmare. I was lying on a bed in a dark room at the hospital. When I got that feeling you get when you know you're being watched, I scanned the room to find my wife standing in the corner, looking directly in my eyes. "Josh, wake up! You need to wake up!" I remember waking up in bed and immediately looking over. I grabbed the handgun I kept on my nightstand, feeling on edge about something. I opened my back door to see what was going on, only to find someone standing in my backyard, approaching with a crowbar. The figure took a few steps toward me, with the crowbar raised above their head. I raised my firearm to confront them. "If you come any closer, I'll shoot you." The figure stopped dead in their tracks, then took off, jumping over the brick fence that separated our backyard from the main road. I called the non-emergency number and let the dispatcher know what just happened. It turned out the man in my backyard was an escapee from the mental hospital. It was the first time that anyone had ever escaped from that place, and of course he ended up in my backyard with a crowbar. Lucky me. This happened about 3 years ago, while I was in medical school. Back then, I was doing some anatomy training. I would go into the details, but it might get a little too technical and long-winded for how much I feel like writing. Just imagine incisions and studies of our insides. Practical training rarely ends on schedule. Well, at least it didn't at my medical school. We were all still working until about 8 p.m. on the night in question. Our classes were sort of weird. If there was still work to be done after 7 p.m. when they were supposed to end, the teachers would just leave us to it until we finished. I didn't really like that, but I guess they had earned their stripes in the profession, and it was just one of those things we would have to get used to. This left 4 of us medical students alone down in the autopsy room. I didn't really mind at all about being left down there, though. It was a strange building, and I'll need to explain a little. There was a set of doors you had to walk through to enter. Then the hall sloped down to another set of doors. Then you went into the autopsy room. I never usually even gave a second thought about being down there, but that night something different happened. We all heard the sound of the entrance door suddenly slamming shut. I thought, it's probably one of those lecturers coming back because he forgot something. But when I didn't hear the sound of approaching footfalls, I thought otherwise. If someone came back from the outside, we should have heard them coming through the second set of double doors, but no one came in. I guessed it was just one of those random things. The door slamming itself isn't much to get yourself worked up about, I thought, even though, admittedly, the setting we were operating in was creepy. I went back to work and just tried to ignore it. I next heard footsteps, though. This time they were near the entrance to our training room, in between the double set of doors. We all looked toward that direction we'd heard the sound from, but no one attempted to come through the doors. Us medical students exchanged glances with each other and asked things like, "You heard that, right? Someone's in there right now." At that point, I knew it wasn't just my imagination. We went back to work. We all just wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. A few minutes passed by, and I definitely heard the sound of footsteps approaching again. I looked in the direction I heard them coming from, but I didn't see anything. I could tell the others in the room were feeling the same as me. We couldn't work well under these constant and strange interruptions. Despite feeling a little creeped out, I decided to go and announce to our little group that I was going in search of those sounds. I went all over the bottom floor, looked down the halls, and in both sets of bathrooms and changing areas. I couldn't find anyone there. Admittedly, I'd searched a little quickly, but there was no one to be found. I went back to the autopsy room and let everyone know that I hadn't found the culprit. There didn't appear to be anyone there any longer, though. Not long later, though, I heard more footsteps, this time sounding closer and louder than before. There was something more to these footsteps, though, an additional sound, a weird squeaking, squelching sound as they moved. It sounded like a pair of boots on a rainy day trudging down the hallway. We all looked at each other in silence. I could see my colleagues' faces turning pale. We took it in turns to ask each other questions that none of us had the answers to, like what exactly was going on and whose footsteps these could be. Eventually, they started to grow louder, so loud that they sounded as if they were coming from inside the same room we were stood in. I couldn't believe my eyes or my ears, because there was no one in the room with us. That is, except the man who was laid on his back in the center of the table with his chest fully open and exposed. I felt as if my sanity was slipping. Someone was clearly moving around in the room with us, but at the same time, clearly nobody was there. We all shot up from our seats and edged away from the sound. My colleagues were freaking out. I have to admit some of them were on the verge of tears. I wanted to leave right now. I needed to get away. All of us were practically trembling at that point. We reached our max, and I shouted to my colleagues to leave. I don't know why that thought didn't cross our minds sooner. I made sure that we covered the body, but we all hurried to do it. We ran out of the building. None of us said a word about it to our lecturers. We thought we could just brush it under the rug. 2 days later, we were set to be back in that room again. I'm pretty sure that I can speak for everyone there when I say none of us were looking forward to being back in there. We couldn't afford to miss a class, though. Our university was super strict on attendance. We didn't really feel as if we had any other choice but to suck it up and get back in there. We headed in. It was always a good idea to get there a little bit before the lecturers. I instantly recognized there was something a little different this time, though. It seemed a little cooler down there. The room was much colder than usual. I quickly realized the training room floor was flooded with water. It had rained heavily over the last day and a half. When our professor arrived, he went bananas. He shouted for the last group that was down there in the autopsy room to step forward. We had to take our medicine and admit it was us. We got into a lot of trouble because we didn't close the door properly when we ran out last time. The only thing is, we all knew that we had. I told the professor about what we had heard, but he wasn't really interested. He wasn't the type that would ever believe in the paranormal. Not that I was a believer back then either. At a later date, a senior lecturer approached me and said he thought he'd encountered something similar to what we had. He even said that the room had been blessed in the past. I often wonder at what those squelching footsteps were. Was it the soul of one of the bodies returning that we had practiced on, or just a bunch of collective students getting worked up and overhearing things? Either way, I can't help but think of that night whenever it starts raining. I moved around a whole lot while I was growing up. I've lived in the city, in the country, and in the suburbs. I moved so much that I didn't really get to know a lot of kids my age very well. Not while I was growing up. After having this be the case for a long period of time, I stopped trying to make friends when I reached a certain age. It didn't seem worth it if my family would just pack up and move a few months after I'd made a new friend. There was a period of time when we moved to this house out in the country. It was in a poorer area, I guess I'd say, where the only houses you came across really were mobile homes. I never tried to make any friends with the kids who might have lived there, though. I also didn't really make friends at school. I don't know what it is about this area, but for some reason it was the only time in my life where I was ever bullied. I think it might have been because I kept to myself and did well in school, instead of playing with everyone else during recess. Whatever it was, though, the bullies were real jackasses and caused me a lot of hell for the year when we were there. Weekends and school vacations were my favorite times because they were the only times I could get away from the bullies at school. The teachers never did anything to make the bullying stop either. This happened during a weekend in the fall. I remember because I was out wearing a jacket and taking a walk. I tried to go out for walks whenever I could on days home because it felt good to get out of the house for a while. There I was, strolling down a gravel road, lost in my own thoughts. After a while, I began to hear some sounds coming up ahead of me, off to the side of the road. I was curious to see what was going on, so I walked up to the area. I noticed there was a fenced-off field in that area. It sounded like there were some people off doing something there, and I began to wonder why. I wasn't curious enough to try and find out myself, though. I was shocked when somebody suddenly approached me from the side of the road. I was surprised to see it because I hadn't noticed anyone had been there. I was really afraid to see it was a kid named John, who was one of the bullies that bugged me at school. John made some comments to me, but none of them were mean at all. In fact, he had heard the noises out in the field too, and was wondering what they were. John asked me if I was curious, and wanted to go see what was going on. I wasn't sure how to feel. I mean, a part of me thought that my bully might have been warming up to me, but another part of me didn't want to go walking with him into a random field. In the end, I decided to go with him though, mostly because I was afraid he would beat me up if I didn't go with him. After walking for a while, we finally noticed a few other guys up in front of us. It didn't take long for me to recognize them also from school. I was a bit scared when I noticed they were all guys who normally hung out with John and always tormented me. That probably meant he had known they were out there all along and was now meeting up with them. I wanted to turn around and go back to the road, but I couldn't force myself to do so. Besides, if these 4 kids wanted to catch me, they easily could and would beat the crap out of me. I obviously didn't want that, so I decided to try and not seem scared. Perhaps they would respect me that way and let me take part in whatever they were doing. As we got closer to them, I realized they all had rifles and were shooting at things. At first, I assumed they were just pellet guns, but they were actual rifles. I found myself even more wanting to get away as quickly as I could. John asked me if I wanted to fire one. I definitely did not, and I told him that was okay. I didn't want to take away any of their fun from them. I would just watch them if that was all right. "Oh, I have a better idea." John laughed with his friends. "How about we use you as the target? That would be really fun." Of course, those words scared the hell out of me. These were bullies I knew were not scared to get physical with someone. It wouldn't surprise me if they were willing to shoot me either. There were only 2 rifles amongst the 4 boys, and they both pointed them at me. I tried to tell myself they wouldn't be stupid enough to try and shoot me. If they did, they would get in a lot of trouble, but I had no idea if they were smart enough to realize that or not. "Well, that's not what I thought would be fun," John told his friends. "I mean, we could just shoot at anything, you know? We could shoot at trees, bushes, rocks, but what would really be fun would be a moving target." All the boys laughed and I got even more scared. I didn't want to run because that would give the boys what they wanted, but I didn't want to just stand there either. "Well, run. It would be a lot harder to shoot you if you're running. If you just stand there like a dumbass, what will you do?" I still didn't move. I was too terrified to do anything. "Run!" John yelled. He sort of lunged at me. That was enough to scare me into running. I took off. I began telling myself that they were just trying to scare me. No sooner than I thought that, did I hear a gunshot ring out. I was so startled that I tripped and fell on the ground. I hadn't been hit by anything, but that didn't mean they hadn't been trying to hit me. I got back up and started running again. It wasn't long after before I heard another gunshot. That was followed by another and another. Each time I kept expecting the gunshot to hit me. I couldn't even be relieved when they didn't, because I was too terrified. I made it to the fence and jumped back over it, getting onto the gravel road. I kept running and didn't stop running until I got home. I was out of breath and in pain, but I hadn't been hit, and I was glad about that. Here's the part that might get you, though. I didn't tell anyone about what happened right away. I was too scared about what the bullies might do to me if I got them in trouble. I kept it to myself and didn't tell anyone until years after we moved away from there. I really don't know how much trouble they would have gotten into anyway. They would have just denied it, and I found the parents of bullies rarely discipline their children for bullying. I can't say that I was bullied much when I was growing up. Rather than being unpopular, I was just the sort of kid that everyone ignored. If people talked about me or had any strange impressions of me, I definitely never knew about it. I spent a lot of time by myself. However, I was not one of those people who liked spending a lot of time by themselves. I would often try to insert myself into a conversation or join up in a ball game if extra players were needed. I wanted to get along with everyone and have those interactions. Normally, it was always a bust. I just had a problem making friends. That still didn't keep me from trying to, though. One day, I was walking home from school. I had a pretty long walk, as I lived out of town. Close enough, though, that the district didn't provide a bus for me. I didn't mind the walk, as I had been doing it all of my life, and it gave me a little time to think. When I was walking by a field, I noticed a bunch of kids from high school that I knew. My curiosity got the better of me, so I decided I would follow them and see what they were doing. This might seem strange to you, and it certainly does to me now as well, but recall this is something I did very often back then. The kids all had a pretty big start on me, so it would take me a while to catch up to them. When I did eventually catch up to them, they were hanging out and smoking pot. They noticed me and actually invited me to come over and hang out with them. They didn't seem worried I would narc on them or anything. They even offered me a smoke as well. I had never done that before, but I wanted them to like me, so I did. Of course, as many first-time pot smokers out there will tell you, the first time can be the roughest. Much to the amusement of the other guys, I was coughing my lungs out for quite a while after. After hanging out for a bit, I hadn't really done much talking, just some listening. One of the guys told us he had a great idea. There was an old tunnel under an old road that had been closed down for years, and they thought it would be cool to go check it out. I was all for it. I walked with the guys for a while until we came upon this tunnel. It wasn't long, and I'm sure you've seen this sort of thing before. I could even see to the other side of it. Still, it had a sort of creepy vibe to it. You couldn't see the dirt road that ran over the tunnel anymore because it had completely grown over. There were tons of bushes and trees grown up over everything around it. One of the boys noticed something, though. It looked like on the very far end, there was a body laying in the tunnel. After he pointed it out, I noticed it too. However, I didn't get curious like the other guys did. It freaked me out and I wanted to just get away from it. There was no way I could tell them that, though. The guys began daring me to go and check it out. This scared me, of course, because I really didn't want to do it, but I also wanted them to like me. After they prodded me for a little while, I decided to go ahead and check it out. The tunnel was kind of dank, but it wasn't wet or anything. It was just unpleasant walking in it, especially knowing I might be approaching a dead body. I walked as slowly as I could, trying to draw it out as long as possible. That seems silly when I say it. Most people would want to get it done with as quickly as possible. As I got closer to the figure in the tunnel, I could see them a lot better. It didn't look like they were breathing. This scared me, but I kept thinking about how cool the guys would think I was if I had approached a dead body. I kept creeping closer. Right when I had gotten up to it, I heard this loud, clanging, echoing noise ring out across the tunnel. I turned to look behind and see what it was, but my attention was quickly drawn back to the body when it tried to reach out and grab me. I stumbled backwards and fell over. I watched him get up, and I could hear the guys laughing at me. I wasn't concentrated on that, though. I was concentrated on the scary figure in front of me, suddenly yelling at me and coming toward me. I got up and began running out of the tunnel. I couldn't even tell you what the figure was yelling at me as I ran out. I just knew that he was very angry, and I was terrified. The guys were running back to the area they had originally been in, and I followed them. I checked behind me at one point, but I didn't see the figure from the tunnel following me. The guys explained to me that the guy in the tunnel was a homeless guy who'd been living there for who knows how long. For some reason, he really hated it when people would come along and go into that tunnel. He would try to attack anyone that did. That clanging sound I heard was one of the guys throwing a rock into the wall of the tunnel to wake the guy up and scare the hell out of me. The guys were all laughing, but I didn't find it very funny. I began to fake laugh too, though, because I wanted them to like me. They seemed to accept me, and I was invited to keep hanging out with them. I had finally made some friends, who I continued to know until long after high school was over. All it took was for them to scare me so bad I nearly shit my pants. I was 18 and had just moved into a new state to start college soon. I only had a few days before classes started, but I wanted to explore a little while I had the chance. The area around the campus was full of forests and hills, with tons of outdoorsy stuff to do. I found a trail that I thought looked nice, and drove down to it one afternoon to walk on it. Online, it said it was about a 2-hour trip, so I didn't exactly bring much, only a bit of water with me. There were no other cars parked at that specific spot, which made me assume that which made me assume that nobody else was on it. Not far in, I walked past another hiker, though. He was sitting on a fallen tree off to the side of the trail and nodded his head at me as I passed by. It looked like he was on his way out because he was sweating profusely and looked somewhat dirty, like he'd been outside for a while already. I kept walking for about 30 more minutes, just keeping to myself and listening to music, when out of nowhere, I heard a man's voice yelling. I turned around and saw that same person that I'd passed by earlier, waving at me to get my attention. I stopped and waited as he jogged up to me. He said the trail name I was on in a questioning manner. I then responded. He then pointed to my right. I looked out, and going off into the trees was another trail that looked almost identical to this one. Neither trail was more than just a thin line of dirt. "Watch out, people tend to get lost in this section going down the wrong way." I smiled and thanked him, but it definitely was a bit odd. The guy seemed nice enough, though, and not meaning to be anything but helpful. As I started walking down the trail he'd told me, he continued along behind me. He explained that he'd lived there for years and walked this path almost every day. He hated to hear about new hikers getting lost out there. I guess it made sense to me at the time. I kept up with the small talk, not really having much of a choice since he was right behind me. After a few minutes, though, the conversation fizzled out, and we just sort of walked in silence for a while. We were still right by each other, mind you, we just weren't saying anything. The trail went straight for a long time. It was a good 45 minutes before I realized how far we'd walked, knowing it was only supposed to be a 2-hour trail. I thought by now it would have started looping around. While I was just starting to think about this, I stumbled over something. It was a rusty railroad track, half buried into the dirt. I was surprised and looked back up, seeing that not too far away from the trail was an abandoned mine. There was this small hole going into the hillside with 3 wooden beams around the entrance and some railway tracks going into it. I walked up and looked inside, but the light from outside didn't go very far at all. It was pitch black with no way to know how far down it went. As I stood outside the entrance, the man came up from behind me. I turned around and saw him standing just a couple of feet from me, but his face was straight. I don't know how to describe it, but he no longer had this harmless look to him. "Go in," he said, in an eerily monotone voice that was nothing like how he'd been speaking before. It was demanding and terrifying. I took off running without hesitation. The man tried to reach out and grab me to stop me, but once I got a few feet away, I didn't hear him attempt to chase me. As I entered the trees, I looked back, and the man was gone. He must have gone right into the abandoned mine. I ran all the way back to the first part of the trail, then got back to my car and left the forest. That was my first real experience outside of my hometown. It was unfortunate, but I think it taught me a lot. I blindly trusted a random person I'd just met, and it could have easily been the last thing I ever did if I'd been forced into that mine. I don't think I would have ever emerged. This was in 2016. I was living alone in a small home in the countryside. Rarely would anyone come by my house unless it was a delivery person. This day, I had gotten out of work at 8 o'clock or so and made the long drive home, arriving at around 9 o'clock. As I went down the dirt driveway and got up to my house, though, I noticed a woman standing right at the front of my door. I was rightfully startled to see someone at my house, especially so late into the day. There wasn't even a car anywhere in sight either. I parked on the driveway and got out, cautiously looking around me. As I walked up to the front door, the woman looked like she was in her late 20s or so and had a large smile on her face, waving at me as I approached her. "What are you doing here? I think you had the wrong house," I said, stepping past her, and putting myself between her and the front door. She said she was lost and trying to get some directions from here into town. It was a strange request since there was no car in sight, and it didn't really answer the question as to why she was out there at my house. Regardless, I told her to go down to the road and make a left, and that would take her all the way to the center of town. She looked at me, still smiling, and thanked me, but instead of walking away, she tried to keep talking to me. It was unmistakably in a flirty manner, which in this context was creepy, not attractive. I tried to cut off the conversation multiple times. She asked me if she could stay with me and warm up for a little bit. Obviously, I said no. She still smiled and tried to convince me, but I again stated I would not let her into my home. I opened the door and went inside, then locked it behind me. I even debated calling the police because everything about this was really sketchy. I then heard her walk off the porch and watched out the window as she went down the driveway and disappeared into the dark, heading toward the road. Seeing that she'd finally left, I left the window and grabbed a drink, then sat down on the couch and tried to forget about that strange encounter. I opened my laptop and put on a Netflix show while I wound down for the night. I was really tired and I dozed off. Maybe 15 minutes in, I shot awake to a knock at the door. It was only a few seconds before they knocked again. A woman's voice called out, asking for me to come to the door. I knew it was the same woman from earlier. I got up and rather than going to answer the door, I went over to the window. I wanted to confirm it was the same person before calling the police to take care of this. When I looked out the window, though, there were almost a dozen men standing outside my home. Some were scattered around in the trees on the side of the driveway, and others were just right near my house waiting by the porch. I called the police, literally shaking as I waited. I heard them moving around the house and talking to each other. One of them mentioned something about another home, but I couldn't figure out anything else on why they were here. They never tried to break in, to my surprise. The woman just kept knocking and calling out for me. That was all. When a patrol car finally came down the driveway, all of them sprinted into the woods in a direction that led to nothing but denser woods. Eventually, though, 3 days later, I found out some unfortunate and horrifying news. One of my neighbors that lived in a house just down the road was missing. After no sign of him, they found his front door unlocked. His house looked normal, like there had been no forceful break-in. I think he may have fallen victim to exactly what happened to me, which makes my encounter with those people even more terrifying, knowing that I could be missing right now. Strap in, this is a decently long one. I'm a 23-year-old woman, and this story is about a 33-year-old man. Let's call him Greg. I met him at the gym about a year back or so. I used to go to the gym with my mother, and being an introvert, I very seldom used to engage with or even talk to people. Being in the gym since the last 2 years, I had seen Greg work out and never really caught him staring or even looking in my direction. He was a well-educated, well-spoken man, and I assumed that interacting with him would not pose any threat to me. One day, Greg just randomly walked up to me at the gym and asked to add me on Facebook so he could promote some things regarding his business. I didn't really think much of it, as I'm barely active on the platform anyway. I let him add me. Slowly, our interactions grew in the gym, as well as on social media. I was going through a rough patch, so I would often find myself looking for a friend or perhaps even more. From the very beginning, my mother did not seem to like Greg. She felt that something was off about him. Regardless, I chose to meet him and another mutual friend of ours from the gym for coffee. I wasn't romantically inclined towards Greg, but I wasn't totally opposed to it either. At coffee, our conversations were quite general. but on text, Greg would casually flirt with me a lot. I would just ignore it, but that turned out to be a big mistake. The more I spoke to Greg and the more I found out about him, the more I realized I didn't see any kind of future with him in it, not even as a friend. Eventually, I started backing off, and took longer and longer to reply to his messages. I didn't want to blatantly confront him. After all, we did go to the same gym, and I wanted to avoid any hostility. Greg also slowly backed off as well, and we stopped talking altogether. Fast forward 6 months. I got my dream job and posted about it on Facebook. Greg congratulated me and told me he was proud of me. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and started replying to his texts again. He immediately began making flirtatious remarks toward me, but this time I told him flat out that made me uncomfortable, and I didn't want to be involved with him romantically or sexually. Subsequently, the conversations died down, and we parted on what I thought were cordial terms. He would often send me messages asking for feedback on some of his work, but I would generally ignore them. Now, in July of this year, Greg messaged me once more, asking for some feedback. He also sent another message asking whether I would like to withdraw from his broadcast list. I respectfully told him I would like to withdraw, since I didn't think I was qualified enough to give him appropriate feedback anyway. He went completely off on me, sending a bunch of messages, most of which I did not understand. I asked for context, and he told me I was only getting that over a call. I agreed. Another mistake. We spoke for 2 hours, wherein I made it very clear that he was only a friend and nothing more. He agreed and was very respectful throughout. Because of that, I assumed there was no harm in simply talking to him. For a couple of weeks, we spoke as friends before he started proposing me being a future work partner for a music venture. I was hesitant and would shoot his invitations to meet down by making various excuses. After about 3 weeks of this, he began making sexual remarks toward me. It made me uncomfortable, and I told him that I didn't want to talk to him anymore since we weren't on the same page. He started to get angry. He told me that if I wouldn't meet him, he didn't want to talk to me anymore either. I thought to myself, good riddance. I was getting increasingly tired of him calling me throughout the day and talking always about his inflated self-image. He told me something like he'd contact me after a year and we could meet then if I reconsidered my feelings toward him. I was growing impatient. I just wanted him out of my life. I was off my phone the next day for 6 to 7 hours. When I came back, I was welcomed to numerous missed calls and messages, most of which were threatening in nature. He threatened to show up to my house and kill me and my family. This is when I realized I may need to involve my family and the police. I told my parents everything. They didn't immediately contact the police, though. These could just be empty threats from a man who wouldn't take no for an answer. The following day, Greg got my parents' numbers and started sending them threatening messages, claiming he would abduct me if they didn't make me marry him. We contacted the police. They went straight to Greg's home to investigate. But seeing his behavior, out on the roof half naked, screaming at the sky, they declared him mentally unfit and told us he could not be arrested. We withdrew the complaint and contacted higher law authorities. Whilst we were awaiting a response, Greg allegedly committed a crime in a 5-star hotel. He attacked a female employee and a guest with a knife and tried to rape the employee. Consequently, an FIR was filed, which led to Greg being admitted to a mental institution. He stayed there for a couple of days and now walks completely free. We were able to file another complaint against him, which was taken more seriously this time. However, we were advised not to create a case, as he would easily get off on bail. So he still roams free and still continues to contact me from unknown numbers every once in a while, making me feel like I'm under constant threat whenever I'm outside my house. I was born, raised, and still live in Texas. I come from a family of hunters. It's pretty much a family tradition. I'm going to tell you about something I experienced when I was 20 years old, back in 2005. My father had just been diagnosed with lung cancer, and naturally everyone in my family was devastated by this, especially me. My dad and I were very close. I had a lot of other personal stuff going on in my life at the time, and I felt like I needed to go out for a few days just to clear my head a bit. I decided to make it a solo hunting trip and packed up some camping gear, along with my Marlin 336 set my dad had gifted to me when I was 18 years old. If I could get sentimental for a moment, my father ended up passing away 3 years after his diagnosis, and to this day I still use that very same rifle for hunting. Anyway, this happened around late October or early November. I don't want to be too specific with the location, because technically I was not supposed to be hunting in this specific area. I will disclose that it was somewhere near the Mexican border. This will be important later. I decided to set up camp for 3 days before heading back. I had been hunting on this land before with some friends of mine, and I knew the precautions to take not to be spotted by the game warden. I'm sure if there's any other hunters listening to this broadcast, they'll be more than happy to tell you we often wipe our asses with the rule book. Before anyone judges me too harshly, or the practice of hunting in general, I will say I'm a very spiritual person and have a profound respect for Mother Nature. I don't put trash everywhere, and every part of every animal I put down never goes to waste. I'll be the first to admit there are hunters that give us a bad name, and me not following rules is more of a middle finger to the government than it is to the sport of hunting. The first day went off without a hitch, no problems whatsoever, aside from the fact there was no game to be found anywhere. I figured I would head further south the next day, to see if my luck would improve any. Other hunters knew about this restricted location, and may have already cleaned out this area. As night fell, I found myself sprawled out next to my truck, staring at the night sky. I wondered if my dad and I would ever take another hunting trip together. That's when I heard the sound of footsteps slowly making their way through a nearby brush. This was alarming for obvious reasons. Whoever this was, they had the drop on me. I knew better than to light up a campfire under these circumstances, but if this person was roaming around in the dark without a flashlight, they may have had some kind of night vision apparatus, giving them the advantage. I was very concerned. If you were looking at me through the trees in that particular moment, it would have appeared as though I was sleeping. I was in an odd position where I was resting on top of my sleeping bag with a blanket, because I felt claustrophobic being fully immersed in a sleeping bag. This happened to be a good thing, because it meant I was able to mobilize myself quickly. Something told me I only had seconds to make a decision. I rolled sideways out of instinct, and as soon as I did so, I caught a glimpse of a muzzle flash coming from the tree line directly in front of me. I felt dirt fly in the air and hit my back, from a bullet striking the ground where I had just been. I scrambled to my feet as more shots rang out from the trees. One of them shattered the passenger side window of my truck. I took cover behind the bed of my pickup and quickly drew the snub nose I had strapped to my ankle. After the gunfire ended, I laid down flat on the ground and returned fire in the direction of the trees from under the truck. I heard several sets of footsteps fleeing the area, but I held my position just in case my theory about night vision was correct. With only 2 rounds left in my revolver, I pretty much spent the rest of that night underneath my truck, pistol aimed at the darkness. I waited there until the sun came out and illuminated my surroundings. I very cautiously got out from beneath my vehicle and packed up my gear as quickly as I could. I hightailed it out of there. Later on, when I told a friend of mine about the incident, He said he wished I would have told him I was heading out that way. He said he would have warned me. The Mexican cartel had started using that area to smuggle contraband and people across the nearby border. This friend of mine was an immigrant from Mexico himself and had several family members mixed up in the cartel and coyote groups. Needless to say, I trusted his word. All things considered, I think I got off pretty easy. Had I been in my sleeping bag that night, no doubt that bullet would have nailed me. These days, I stick to designated hunting grounds. Some things are just not worth the risk. Okay, so buckle up because this is going to get weird. This isn't something unknown amongst my friends and the people local to me, as I live in quite a small town. In grade 5, I would have been about 13 or 14, and I had no friends. I was and still am kind of weird, and it tended to throw people off. Making friends in high school was so difficult for me because I refused to change who I was just to fit in. During the second week of school, I met George in my English class. Our teacher had sat us together, and we had begun talking and building a friendship. George seemed very nice, and we had a lot in common as well. He had come from a different elementary school. It was odd because people from his area commonly went to a different high school, although he insisted he wanted to go to this one because there were certain classes he wanted to take that the other school didn't offer. After about a week of talking together during English, he asked if I wanted to eat lunch with him. We had the same lunch period, and he said he noticed how often I sat alone. I thought it was the nicest gesture, so I agreed. We ended up having lunch together for a while, but then I started making some new friends. I always invited him to eat lunch with a few of the friends I had made, but he always declined. Then, one day in English, he passed me a note. This was very strange since we were sitting right next to each other. It said something like, "I need to talk to you. Can we please sit alone together for lunch?" I wrote back I would sit down with him, and we hardly spoke for the rest of the period. I started getting really weird vibes from him. So, lunchtime rolled around. I saw him sitting at the end of a row. I go to sit down, and he says, "No, let's go outside to talk." I agreed. He looked really upset. I wanted to know what was going on. When we got outside, he led me over to sit on a curb in front of the school and started talking very aggressively. He told me it was unfair of me to make other friends when he was the one who'd befriended me first. He told me I had to eat lunch with him because when I was alone, he ate lunch with me. Now that he was alone, I was obligated to do the same. It was a very bizarre conversation. I explained that he could sit with me and my friends, and that way there would be no issues. He could even make some new friends himself. I had enough friendship to spread around, and he had nothing to be upset about. What he said next completely shocked me. I could see the anger in his eyes. He grabbed my arm real hard. "I don't think you understand. You owe me this. You will sit with me." I got freaked out at that point and told him we could sit alone together every other day. I just wanted to get away from him and go back inside where more people were around. After that day, I started getting these weird messages in my email. I'll never forget the first one. All it said was, "All women are Satan. The devil lives in all of you." I didn't recognize the address and assumed it was some internet troll trying to scare me. Then they started coming more frequently, all with the same type of message. I started getting scared, so I showed my friends these emails. They agreed that it was weird, but also agreed it was probably some random person just trying to scare people. One of my friends, though, told me that she thought it was George. She had heard some stories about why he'd come to our school instead of going to the other one. She told me he was so obsessed with one of the girls in his class that her mom had to get a restraining order against him over the summer. I told her that sounded insane, and I didn't believe it. I was having lunch with George on alternate days, and we were still friendly during English class, but I was trying to distance myself from him. After Christmas break, our schedules changed for second semester. I was very happy about this, because I knew I'd have a different lunch period and we wouldn't have English together anymore. I could slowly disassociate myself from him. I was wrong. He started leaving notes in my locker, confessing his undying love and explaining that we were meant to take over the world together. The feelings were very much not mutual. I had to tell him that enough was enough. I explained he was overwhelming me, and I needed space from our friendship. He seemed to understand. He didn't get upset or yell. He just agreed to give me my space. In the meantime, the emails started getting much worse. They started threatening my life, telling me they knew where I lived and went to school. I went straight to my mom when this started happening. My mom called the police. The police informed the school. The school looked up the email in their records and found out it was indeed George sending those emails all along. He was suspended and wouldn't even look at me after. I was honestly so relieved. 1 year after we graduated high school, George and his mother went out for a drive. While she was driving, he stabbed her over 100 times. When the police found him, he tried saying it was a car accident, but when they questioned him further about all the stab wounds, he admitted to killing her. He claimed he was trying to release the devil from his mother's soul. He pleaded insanity and was found not criminally responsible for her murder. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. I know it's been quite a while since I did an outro. If you guys like this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback about the video itself, please be sure to leave it in the comments below. I always do read the comments, although with me recording every day, I don't have as much time to respond to them anymore. If you guys have a story you would like to send in yourselves, please be sure to look in the description below the video. There will be links to my Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail accounts. You can go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to your story as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, the type of story, if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Also, please be sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and as much correct grammar as possible, to ensure the best chances of your story appearing in a video. I think that's about it for this video here. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts about the channel or anything, and thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day.